Hello and welcome to the My Hope Story podcast from Hope Community Church Blackhill. Stories of hope, all about Jesus.
Who are we, but sinners saved by grace?
Right, Terry.
How you doing, Pete?
Bad man. If you've not seen this before, so we've been doing a little podcast for our church with our members called My Hope Story Podcast. And just been doing that. It's been great. And I've been trying to do maybe sort of a wee bit different, so try and catch people from Glasgow or beyond that aren't part of our church, but who know that same hope, who have also came to know the hope that only Jesus gives. And we've had a few of these, so John Mason's been on, Stuart Patterson's been on, but the best one is the legend, which is Terry McCutcheon. So Terry, I met you, I think, when I started working at the previous church in Blackhill. Was it 2009?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
I remember it because we were at a weekend away with some of the young people. And basically, you were the only other fundamentalist nutcase that was there, like me. So I was like, yes, there's someone here, which is fun. But Terry, we just want to chat a little bit about life and how you came to know the Lord, what life was like growing up, and what the Lord's called you to now. Is that cool?
That's fantastic.
So, where were you born? What was that like?
Oh, well, just down the motorway a wee bit. Another place beginning with B, Blackhill. Right. So I was born there in the mid-70s. My mum and dad, and I've got 5 brothers. Yeah, right. So I'm number 4. So I'm the oldest of the youngest 3, and so I stayed in Blackhill all my life. Until I was 19. My mum and dad and that are still there. Right. My man and dad.
How big is Blackhill?
Maybe a couple of thousand people, I think, possibly.
And it's just off the M8 now, isn't it? Did the M8 not get built through it or something, or?
No, the scheme is to the side of it, aye. But I've always known the motorway. I was kind of a boy. So you driving to Edinburgh, though. Why you would want to drive to Edinburgh, I don't know. But as you come on the motorway, Berlin Prison's at the right hand side, Blackhill's just at the left, right. So you come after Ridley Steps, kind of a cut off, and aye. So I brought up there, kind of in the 70s, really. And I think life was no different. Life was much more simpler back then. Most days didn't have anything, but you didn't know you were poor, because everybody was kind of in the same boat, and there was a real something back then. I think in many ways is missing the day. Sometimes I think there was a better sense of community back then. I really feel there was more community, in and out of each other's houses, tapping each other for milk and sugar and tea bags and kind of a whatnot. We were all there and up in a tenement, all the boys on the one room, 6 years on the one room, and one of my brothers wet the bed, and thankfully I didn't have to share a bed with him, I shared a bed with my weird brother. But then, we moved up to Provenmill, which is really just it's the same scheme, really. We got kind of a 4-in-a-block house when I was about 10, which meant the 3 years were in different rooms and stuff. But life was fine, kind of a growing up. As I say, but I struggled a lot as a kid, I always felt there was something missing. Mm-hmm. I always just felt, if somebody had told me I was adopted, I would have said, "Oh, that's what it is," that's why I feel like, I don't fit in and stuff. But I always felt there was something missing. And then years later, when I was a Christian, I read in one of the books of the Bible, a book called Ecclesiastes, that in chapter 3, verse 11, it says, "God has set eternity in the hearts of men." And when I read that, I kind of felt that's what that was it. That was what was missing.
Did you have kind of Christian input upbringing? Like, did you just go to church? Was there like an awareness that you were Christian? Or I guess, was it Catholic background you had? Or?
Roman Catholics, aye. You would get that with my name, dead giveaway. It's Terence.
And the top that's on underneath your place.
Well, that's my local junior football team.
Oh, is it? Okay, that's
St Roch's of Candy. St Roch's. The full name is Terence Andrew Patrick Murphy McCaffrey McCutcheon, right? So there's no prizes for guessing what football team I support. So we were Roman Catholics, but I would say whether it was Catholic or Protestant in the housing scheme, and I say this all the time, faith had more to do with belonging than it did about believing. So we belonged to a particular football team. We belonged to a particular political ideology rather than believing particular or personal truths about the Lord Jesus.
It's a cultural kind of thing.
Aye, definitely. And it was more what you were anti than what you were pro. You know, I'm not a Rangers fan. I'm not a proddy. I'm a Catholic and whatever else. But you know, being a real Christian isn't just about believing or belonging. It's about behaving as well. And you know, I didn't really have any examples of that. I don't think I really knew anybody that was a real Christian. And we were quite you know, my dad's side of the family, Irish Roman Catholic, my granda, and then my mum's side of the family would be kind of a Scottish Protestants and Orange as well, you know, and you know my mum's side of the family are brothers and stuff.
Was it like mixed marriage then? In that
yeah,
sense?
it was. Aye,
but you're brought up Catholic.
I was brought up Catholic. And thankfully, which means,
they chose the wrong side there, didn't they?
because it means I'm a Celtic fan, you know. But you know, my dad's side of the family, you know, they would have been Orange and you know, frequent the Loudon Tavern, which is apparently the greatest pub in the world, you know. So I pretty much we would have had holy photos, photographs up on the wall, you know, things of Mary and whatever else, you know.
Like confirmation, things like that. Did you do that?
Yeah, we done all that stuff. I was an altar boy. I served as an altar boy, but it was, as you say, that word cultural. It's what you done. You know, when you've got a wean born, you know, you just get it baptised. You know, we need to get the wean done. You know, you make your Holy Communion. You don't have a say in that. You know, you're part of the school. Confirmation, affirming the vows that your parents took in your behalf. I mean, again, you don't kind of have a say in that. It's just all cultural. It's just kind of a what you do. And you know, there was no sort of a Christian influence out with chapel whenever we went. You know, we didn't go to chapel.
So what did you do? What did you spend your time doing as a young lad in Blackhill?
Running about the street, playing football, stuff like that. But my oldest brother used to box, and kind of a growing up really. I really looked up to him, you know. He was a wee bit like my hero, kind of. I grew up my older brother and stuff, and he boxed. So when I was about 11 or 12, I started to box, and I kind of had done that for about 5 years.
Oh.
And I was that good. That I had my own ring name. You know, they called me Terry Picasso McCutcheon. Somebody said, "Why do they call you Picasso?" I said, "I spend a lot of time in the canvas." You know, so it wasn't very good.
You're also a lot closer to the canvas than most of them anyways.
Most definitely. And, you know, I had sponsors, and the sponsors sponsored, you know, their names were on the sole of my boxing boots because they get more exposure for their money. So I know that helped keep us a bit of a focus. But no matter what I kind of did, there was always that feeling of there was an emptiness. There was always an emptiness.
What about school then? Like, you do well at school? How was school experience for you?
Good at school. I went to primary school in Germiston, which is between Blackhill and Royston. So I went to primary school there, a school called St Gilbert's. Loved school. Was good at school. Was in all the kind of a top groups in the school. And then secondary school was St Roch's. St Roch's Secondary, down in Royston. And again, loved school. School was great. But I think back then I started to get into a bit of trouble because I would be, you know, just nothing major, just with the school and whatever, dogging school and whatever else. And the emptiness that I felt, I would always say, see that age when you start becoming, you know, when puberty hits and you start becoming, you know, a wee boy is beginning that process of becoming a man. I struggled terribly. And I would say, you know, if my head was wired to a video monitor for 10 minutes, I would get hung 10 times for the things that went on in my head. And so, where do you go with that? Who do you talk to about that stuff? And for myself, I wasn't very articulate. I wasn't a great speaker, and I always these things filled me with such low self-esteem, and I had a real lack of acceptance for myself because I felt that that's who I really was. And if anybody really knew who I was, then they wouldn't have want to have anything to do with me. So I became a chronic people pleaser. You know, I become dead funny in the class, getting myself into trouble and all that stuff, because I felt if anybody really found out what went on in my heart or went on in my head, they wouldn't want to have anything to do with us, you know.
And so that's through secondary school, St Rocks. Like, where'd you go after that? Did you have idea of what you wanted to job to do, or what did your family do? Was your dad working?
No, he didn't work. You know, my mum and dad didn't work. You know, we'd often laugh about that. You know, when you get a census in, you know, my mum shouting up to my dad, "Have you ever had a job?" You know, and you know, so never, you know, he never worked. My ma would have, you know, been on the brew, you know, getting brew money. But my ma would have sometimes would have had wee casual jobs, you know, going out cleaning, so it was cash in hand and kind of all that stuff. And I remember she got caught. And that meant that there wasn't a lot of money about anyway being on the brew, but it meant that their money got cut for a long time till they paid back the money. So it kind of made things tough. So I never really had.
Like, did they want you to do better than that? Like, did they want you to go get a job, or was it just assumed you would kind of same lifestyle? Or?
Well, I think they would want you to kind of get a job, but there wasn't anything like let's plan for your future or whatever else, or you know, what you're thinking. I think you should stay on at school, or but you just kind of left to yourself to make your way yourself. And you know, I never really knew what I wanted to do, because I never really knew who I was. I was all mixed up. I didn't really know kind of what I wanted to do, and so I just followed pals, whatever they done. You know, I think my first job was a delivery van boy in Dunninmoor, and you know, delivering the ginger and stuff to shops and pubs and stuff like that, kegs of beer and cases of beer, and that was done in Brigton. That was where the depot was in Brigton Cross. I done that for a few months, and I never lasted long in jobs. I was always getting the sack or whatever else. I was a YTS tyre fitter. I worked in a cash and carry. What else did I do? You know, removals, stuff like that. What else? I was a forklift driver, learning to drive forklifts and stuff like that. So lots of different things.
And so what, like, if it wasn't like obviously life oriented around work, like what were you spending your time doing? Like, was there drinking involved back then? Like, kind of partying about the streets? Like, what was life like kind of towards the end of school? And
Aye, well, probably in the earlier teens, you know, experimenting a wee bit. As probably lots of folks in the housing schemes or whatever do, or certainly when I was growing up, you know, where it was solvents, you know, buzzing gas, buzzing glue, a wee drink now and again, a wee bit of a joint now and again. But it was probably around about when I was probably about 15 and a half. I started running about with guys who were older than me, and certainly substances kind of became the centre of the thing. I used to deliver Chinese takeaways. So I was the boy, I was the runner. So there was a driver, and I would take the thing to the door, and so I think the driver paid me £4 a night, and I got to keep all the tips. And me and my pal, my best pal growing up was a boy called Pie Man, and me and Pie Man had I think we had all the nights. There were 6 nights in the Chinese delivery, and we had them all between us. And so, you know, a young boy at 15, we were, you know, 14, 15, you know, we were getting 70, 80 quid a week, you know. And so, so I had the means. And then, you know, as I say, we started running about with boys that were older than us, and we're smoking dope. We're smoking dope every day. And that's, you know, that's the way. And what I found, by the way, was, see, drugs change how you feel, and I remember I didn't feel too good about myself. I always felt there was something missing, or whatever else, and drugs would change kind of how I felt, and made me feel good about myself. They made me forget myself. There was a pleasure in them. There was an enjoyment in them. There was an escapism in them, and so we kept doing it. So that became an everyday thing. But very quickly, all the things that were part of my life, like the boxing, that went. I'd play the guitar and do a wee bit of singing, and was always involved in school shows and all that, and whatever else. But I'd sell the guitar and all that stuff, and very quickly just using drugs became the centre of life. It was like, wow, I like this. I can't believe I found this. I love this. I want to keep doing this. And that progressed. By the time I was 16. 1990, Glasgow was a city of culture that year. The dancings were open till 5 in the morning, and then we were going to the dancing, and so you're involved in that whole kind of a scene as well, taking ecstasy, taking amphetamines, stuff like that, and then after the dancing, it would have been taking downers, benzos, where upjohns, Valium, or back then it was yellow eggs, temazepam, jellies. Would have been taking kind of an aim to come down. Then through the week, smoking dope, and then the whole cycle goes again, at the weekend. So that very quickly, drugs became. And I would say, somebody would say, how did you end up? How did you end up in drugs? And I would say, well, they were there. And I'd never really thought it through and thought, do I want to take drugs? And, they were there, and I'd never really made a decision about them. And, I just began to use. I
think that was the story of a lot of your mates, a lot of guys, like, growing up in the scheme then? Was that similar?
So. I think so. I definitely think so. I remember hearing a pastor once saying, see the trouble with sitting on the fence? You can't pick what guerdon you fall in when the wind blows. And that's true for lots of things in life, right? See if you don't nail your colours to the mast, or you don't make up your mind about it, you'll be put into a situation where the actual situation will make up your mind for you, right? And that's true for a lot of things in life, and that was certainly the way it was kind of for me. And they were there. The rest of the gang sort of were doing it, and I'll try this. There wasn't any trauma, there wasn't any bad parenting going on in the house. My man and dad certainly no alcoholics or anything like it, nowhere near it. In fact, my ma doesn't even drink, but. I wasn't allowed to run about the streets, by the way, like till 2 and 3 in the morning. I mean, I would say, when people talk about the end of their drug use, being laughable and demoralising, the beginning of mine was demoralising. I mean, I was running about Blackhill and smoking dope, talking out the side of the mouth as if I was a gangster, and all that. And then somebody would say, "Hey, Terry, it's 9:45. And I would have to run, double draw the joint, and then run home, because my dad was quite strict. I had to be in for 9:30. I was 16, Pete, and I had to be in.
Did they know what you're getting up to?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Maybe they should have noticed, right? I mean, but sometimes kids run about that age. We're like butterflies. We don't know who we are yet, and so we change things a lot. We change the hairstyle, we maybe change friends, we change our clothes, we kind of change the groups that we're into and whatever else. But there was a lot of stuff. No, they didn't. They didn't notice. I think the first they noticed was. So I start smoking dope at 15. 16, I'm taking dance drugs and whatever else, and then everything else that goes with that whole dance scene, coming down and whatever, smoking dope through the week. By the time I'm 17, I'm using opiates. I'm beginning to snort a drug called Temgesics. And people would have got them for bad backs, and you can crush them up and you can snort them, or you can inject them. And back then we were snorting them. I mean, we looked down on people who injected drugs. You know, they were junkies. And those guys, we hung about closes, and we'd hang about closes, smoking dope and whatever else. And if one of these junkies kind of went by, you know, you've always got the boat iron brew, and, you know, can I get some of your ginger? We would have told them to take it with them, you know. But little did we know that was the road that we were all kind of again doing. So by 17, kind of using opiates and stuff, and then having wee opportunities at selling drugs, and I was rubbish, absolutely rubbish at selling drugs, because I wanted everybody to like me, and you know, I would be giving people £10 bits of hash for £9, you know, and that's costing me money. And my ma and da, or my dad fund drugs in the house, you know. He fund an ounce of speed, and he found kind of all deals of hash and stuff like that, and he put us out. Put us out the house.
At 17?
17, aye. Put us out. And my ma, like most mas, you know, with her boys, you know, she batted for me. And I think after a week, I got back in. I took us back in. But if you keep doing the same things, you keep getting the same results, right? And I hadn't changed, and I wasn't in the intention of changing. And less than a week after being back in the house, my dad found stuff again, you know, and that was me out, you know. So a lot of parents have had lots of terrible, you know, terrible stories with their children in addiction, you know, stealing off them, robbing them blind, robbing everything out the house. I never done that, you know. I never, you know, I was out the house before, you know, I was anywhere near that stage. So I was kind of out the house. I was at the house at 17, I think, 17, 18.
Where'd you go after that then?
Stayed with my pal and his girlfriend for a while, and then after that I stayed with a brother for a while. I stayed in my brother's house for a while in Blackhill, but that was my older brother. And see that older brother, the one that I looked up to, who was like a hero of mine. Well, he was great, you know. He boxed and he was very good, you know. He was very good. He could probably have made something out of boxing for himself. But he found alcohol at 19, and he really fell for grace in my eyes, because I pitied him, you know, when he was drunk and all that, and I was like, oh, he's a pest and whatever else, and I actually resented him. I resented him for, you know, for me thinking, you know, he was my hero at one time, you know. I totally resented him. But he had a house in Blackhill, and I was staying there, but he was gone with this woman in Cumbernauld, and he got married, and so he gave up his house and moved to Cumbernauld, so that left me homeless. So I went and stayed with another brother. He stays in Pollock. I stayed in Pollock for a month, and then by the time I was 19, that was me then in the homeless scene, because I had to go and register to stay in a hostel when I was kind of 19. Aye.
I guess that didn't help, kind of starting with addiction stuff and all that.
Oh no, man! Back then, people were talking the mid-90s, 1994. The World Cup was about to begin, and the 6th. I'm nuts for dates. I remember dates and all that. One of my things. The 6th of June, 1994. Was the day that I booked into Bell Street Hostel, and that's up the Gallagate end, the Barrowland. You've got the Barrowland T-shirt on. Is it Bell Street? That's where you had to go initially, if you get maybe put up in Bell Street for a night. And I think there was 4 of these big hostels, and each of them held something like 252 men, and you only had to be 18 to be in there. So it's 18 and over, and 4 of these run about the city. One was in Brigton, one was Bell Street, just up at the Barrowlands. One was Peter McCann House, which is just at the top of Buchanan bus station. And another was Cheapside Street, James Duncan House, which is just across from the Marriott Hotel and under the Kingston Bridge. And they all housed 252 men. And once you get in there, that was your room. You know, you didn't have to, you know, in some cities or some places, you don't have to queue up for a room every night. That was your room. And I think you paid something like most of it was covered by housing benefit, but you paid something like £4 a week, and you got a wee room with a bed, a built-in wardrobe, a wee chest of drawers with a kind of a worktop area with a couple of sockets. So you had space maybe to put a TV and maybe a kettle and stuff like that, and maybe have a wee fridge and stuff. The toilets and the showers were all shared back in the day. They were there on the land, and you paid £4 a week or something to stay there. And it was one of these, like a hotel key card thing. And there was a canteen, so you what you were entitled to was your breakfast every morning, and it was you were allowed 7 items, and 3 cups, whether it was milk, coffee, or tea, and so you thought it was brilliant, and in many ways I loved it. Because, you paid £4, you didn't need to worry about nothing, and then you could spend the rest of your money kind of on drugs, and that's what I did. The police would come in, the police would, sometimes they're looking for ID parades, and lots of different posts, so they want to come where there's a lot of men, concentration of men, and they would come to a lot of the homeless hostels because they knew the guys would do it. You come up with Blackhill and you ask guys to take part in an ID parade, they'll chase you, right? They'll be like, beat it. But in a hostel where a lot of guys are scrambling for money, they knew that they would get that, and so the coppers would come, and we would get £6-10 sometimes for doing an ID parade. Sometimes they get you to stay on for another one, so it was a good wee racket,
Was that meant to be a short-term thing then, these places, or did people end up being there for a long time? Or?
Well, aye, there was guys there for years. There was older men, and they'd been in these places 10 years or whatever. I suppose it's there's if you're not causing any hassle, there's no push on you, and if you're not pushing to try and kind of get a house, and in many ways, sometimes a house isn't the answer, right? Because a house can just be an elastoplast, kind of the situation. And I remember years ago speaking somewhere, and somebody saying, well, why do we have all these homeless? Oh, I see all these empty houses. And sometimes that can be the worst thing, because unless you address the issues that led to the homelessness in the first place, then, if you get a house, we say to the boys in our groups, what happens if you get something that you're not ready for? Well, it ends up a terrible mess. I mean, I can hardly look after myself, and, take a house. A house comes with responsibilities. You've got to pay bills, you've got to tidy up, you've got to buy food and whatever else. So being in a hostel really suited me, because I, no responsibility. You didn't need to think about nothing. There's cleaners and everything. You didn't need to think about nothing. You paid your £4. You had a breakfast every day, and the rest of the money was your own. So
you're still using it at this point? Was that just just every day, kind of what you did?
Yeah.
And what, where did that lead?
Just before I left my housing scheme, but just before I left Blackhill, Smack, heroin hut, kind of a Blackhill, and lots of us would be lots of my pals would be, beginning to smoke heroin, and they would be throwing in £10, £5 each for a tenner bag, and they'd half a tenner bag and whatever else. But it didn't interest me really, because I still liked the Thames G6, and I would prefer to go to Carntine, and I used to go down there and buy Thames G6, get them for £2.50. I would prefer to have 2 Thames G6 than I would a fiver bit of kit. And so when I first went into the hostels, it was still Thames. I was kind of taking, but a lot of drug use there, and so it would have just developed down that road, using kit every day, and everything else that kind of goes with it, really. And
was there awareness, so you talked a little bit about that whole eternity set in our hearts kind of thing, was there an awareness at that stage that there must be more than this, or kind of a wanting to get out of that lifestyle, or what am I here for, what am I missing, or was it just kind of numb, do you think?
Just numb. That's the thing. That's the thing. Here's what somebody once said to me: there's good news and bad news about getting off drugs. And I says, what's the good news? They says, you get your feelings back. I says, what's the bad news? You get your feelings back. So back then, the thing about drugs is they numb you. They kind of numb you, and so you know, some people would say, you know, do you not have a conscience? You know, what you've done to your mum and your dad or whatever else, or, you know, whoever else's house that you've tanned or whatever. Do you not have a conscience about that? No, because see when you're on drugs, you know, you're numb. You know, the only thing that's in your mind is, I need to get more drugs. I need to get full of it. And anybody that's in the way is kind of a collateral damage. So there wasn't any sense of that at all back then. It was just being hedonistic. Whatever makes me feel good, I'm going for it. And so that, you know, so I would say drugs were not my problem. Drugs were my attempt at a solution. So that emptiness that I felt back then, that was always my problem, how I felt about myself. You know, the big questions of life: who am I? Where am I going? What am I doing here? Where have I come from? But my house wasn't a little house in the prairie. And a lot of houses and housing schemes are no little house in the prairie where we can get to sit and debate or talk about these things. And so my drug use was an attempt at a kind of a solution. And, you know, drugs do work for a time. But, you know, I love this. I feel this is what I've always been looking for. You can't believe, you know, when you meet people and they're no using drugs, you think, why are you no using drugs? You're off your head, you know. When actually it was me it was off. It was kind of a me it was off my head. But as drugs, as you go in the years with drug use, what you actually find is, you know, like the Rolling Stones, you don't get the same done. You don't get the same satisfaction. And then in the end, you know, you're enslaved, and you end up you're betrayed. You know, the thing that I turned to cure my emptiness in years to come would actually become part of the cause. My emptiness, no satisfaction, and the emptiness. But then again, you've got all these wasted years and all the guilt and all the shame and everything else kind of added to that. So there was no sense of thinking about eternity or thinking about what my emptiness or that stuff. That was until I get kicked out of that hostel. I was in that hostel and get kicked out of that one. I get kicked out for fighting. It wasn't even my fight. It was somebody else's fight, and it was I involved in it and whatever else. But I get kicked out, and that was me meant to be DNA. Do not accommodate, right? But I appealed it. And I managed to get into Cheapside Street. Now, Cheapside Street Hostel was there underneath the Kingston Bridge, just down for the Marriott Hotel, right along at the end of Argyle Street, just before you go to the kind of exhibition centre. So I managed to get in there. And again, same sort of a scenario, a 252-bed hostel. But where we are in the city has changed. Because where we are in the city now is just along from the Anderston area and the Anderston bus station area. And remember, we're in the middle of the 90s. This is now January 1995. And, the city centre wasn't the way it is now. We're going back, you know, 20-odd years. And that was the red light district. It was a red light district then. And I remember one night I was... I maybe had a boat of cider or something like that, and I was kicking a ball about outside. It was a Friday night, kicking a ball outside the hostel, and a boy come walking down the street, and I think he was for up this way, wee Knox, JMO Knox. I'm sure he was for Blackhill or Easterhouse, and he comes walking down the street, and he's got a box of cornflakes. You know, when you're staying in a hostel getting 7 items a day and whatever else, you know, but a box of cornflakes like gold dust, you know. And I was like, where'd you get them? And he says, I got them for the mission. Mm-hmm. And I was like, all right, you want to take us? He went, it's shut now, Terry. I says, when's it open back up? He says, Monday night. And I says, well, will you take me up? And he took us up. And it was up there, it was up at that party, Argyle Street where What Every Woman Wants used to be. Wawa's, what every woman wants, one of the cheapest shops in the town, right? And that'd be one of the things you'd say, and you get your rig out suit of what every woman wants. And, you know, I never bought anything out of what every woman wants, but I once got caught shoplifting out of what every woman wants. It was absolutely embarrassing, man. You know, and when I got took to the post office, even the post were laughing at me. You know, they were bringing it out, you know, this and that. And then for last, and he says, and a cuddly toy. You know, it was like a generation game. Absolutely embarrassed. But there in that area, there was a lot of the buildings. It was beginning to get done up. They were looking to regenerate it and that, and there was like whole blocks that were designated for demolition.
Is that down Clydeside you're talking? Down
Down there. So if you go through, if you go walk along Argyll Street at the four corners where Pizza Hut and all that are, go under the Central Bridge, and go along that way. Maybe round about. There used to be a big bridal shop there on the corner. I think, is that called Brown Street? And maybe it's Crimea Street. And the Ministry of Defence places there. Do you know it? No, you're not as far along yet as the Marriott. So just run about there on the right hand side. So like West Campbell Street and that, where I think Bigger's the pawn shop. So what was a knife shop? Victor Morris. You know, Victor Morris shop would sell big knives, big boner knives and all that. Just at that area. So sort of in there, Cadogan Street. Kind of a Cadogan Street, West Campbell Street.
Because the Glasgow City Mission was beyond, like, behind that for a good bit. Like, I guess that wasn't where you're talking right now, but was down, walking from that area to Clydeside.
Yes.
Was it Berkeley or something like that? Was that where?
Yeah, but that was later on. So that was later on. So this was even before Glasgow City Mission had a building. So there was like a block, like say like this table, and it's right in the red light district. Where you are, Anderson Bus Station is there. Now, Anderson Bus Station, you know, you're talking about in the 80s and the 90s, it was mental, absolutely mental. There would be a lot of people skippering, which means sleeping rough, right? That's just a term that's used, you're skippering. And underneath the ramp and in there, underneath Anderson Bus Station, it was like a whole different world, right? And it was like Cardboard City, and there was people that had their wee skippers all really nice and everything else, and there was all sorts of, but there was all sorts of damage being done. You know, you've got lasties who are prostituting themselves, who are using drugs, and then they've got the boyfriends, you know, the boyfriends that are hanging about with them. You've got RA characters as well. You've got a lot of stabbings going on. You've got a lot of assaults going on. You've got a lot of robberies and rapes and all sorts of stuff. And round about kind of back then, early 90s, remember, there's quite a few of the lassies. There was a spate of murders in the prostitute scene, quite about 6 or 7 of the lassies were all kind of murdered and stuff. So that's where it is, right? And, you know, This is a part of the city that even a lot of tough men wouldn't go, right? And especially under the cover of darkness. You don't wander along that way drunk. But that's how it always impressed me, that right in there, in that part of the city that were under the cover of darkness that a lot of tough men wouldn't go, there was these Christians. So Anderson Bus Station's like earlier where you are, but there's a block. This is Argyll Street, this is West Campbell Street, and over there at your corner, there was an old pub called Cornerstone, and that was for the girls and the girls only. So all the guys would be hanging about outside, and whatever, the lassies would be able to go in, get a cup of tea and whatever else. And then the folks that ran Glasgow City Mission, it was a couple back then called Hugh and Maureen McKenna, and both Hugh and Maureen had backgrounds like me. Both of them were alcoholic, both of them were Roman Catholic. And both of them went to Alcoholics Anonymous. And Hugh got sober nearly for a year, 3 times, and drank again. And he wandered out the pub one night, you know, just crying out to God. See, you know, you need to be real, because my life is down the tubes. And he was back at AA, and some people in AA had become Christians. They'd got converted. They were going along to Finlay Memorial Church. And I think back then, the organisation now is called Stauros, which just is Greek for cross. But I think back then they might have been Alcoholics Victorious. So some of these alcoholics had wandered into these Christian meetings and had become Christians, had heard the gospel of Jesus and had committed their lives to Jesus. So Hugh started going along there, getting nosy. And he felt there was an altar call, you know. The guy made an appeal about coming to Jesus, and he felt he should have done it, but he didn't. And he went kind of back home, and he was staying in his ma's spare room at that time. And he phoned the pastor guy. Was a guy, I got an Irish guy called Arthur Williams, and Arthur came up to see him, and Hugh said to him, you know, blah, 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 and whatever else. And Arthur, there in his ma's wee room, led him to Christ. And so Hugh was then still going about Alcoholics Anonymous, staying sober, but he just couldn't get air about the change in his life, you know, that Jesus was real, and he was sharing about it in AA. And do you know the funny thing was, Pete? Do you know the people who had most trouble with that? Was people who were a long-term sober and who were quite religious. You know, they would have been Catholics or Protestants, and they would have been saying to you, oh, you can't talk about that in here. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, you're meant to share your experience, your strength, and your hope. And you was saying, well, I'm just sharing my experience, my strength, my hope. But he said that that's what convinced him that it was the truth, you know. Where the apostle writes, you know, the world becomes crossed out to you, but you become crossed out to the world as well, right? So he ended up, he worked for about 7 years in a homeless unit in the Talbot Centre, which is still there. He worked there with homeless guys, a lot of older guys. You know, we're going back into the 70s here, and he done that for about 7 years, and then the opportunity came up as a city centre outreach worker for Glasgow City Mission. So never had any buildings back then. Hugh, in many ways, was the spearhead of all the work that you see still happening today. And he had a budget of 30 quid a month or something, and he was to go round the skippers and go round the places, build relationships up with folks, offer them cups of tea and whatever else. But obviously, because there was lassies working the tune, he knew how dangerous that was for himself, just as a guy and all that as well. And so his wife, Maureen, you know, incidentally, both of their names were McKenna before they were married, you know, and you know, Maureen had become a Christian, obviously, as well, and she joined them in the work. So they approached Glasgow City Council because these buildings were earmarked for demolition anyway, and they were able to get that old pub. So what they did was they got the old pub and they converted it just like they had been converted, and they were reaching out to the women. And then there was this other one here at this corner that was called Rendezvous, and they opened that up for the boys. So we would go there. They were opened every night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, and I would go there for the hostel on Cheapside Street, and I'd go up to the mission, cup of tea, rolling sausage, cakes, sandwiches, all sorts, and then every night they would also share a gospel message. So that was my first introduction to kind of a Christians, and it was all through this boy J-Mo Knox with a box of cornflakes, and I'd go up to the mission, and it always, as I say, it always impressed me that this place was absolutely nuts. You know what I mean? There would be slashings and all that happening outside, and these Christians were there, you know, sharing Jesus, wanting to make Jesus known about these folks that maybe other people in the city had totally forgot all about. So I would go along there, but I remember I would, you know, I mean, being brought up in Blackhill, and you know the background that I've got. I said to you, know, my Irish Catholic and Orange Protestant. You know, I was a big Celtic fan and whatever else. But even back then, I'd looked for an identity, and so I was quite bigoted. I was kind of quite bigoted. My room would have been full of a lot of political posters, Irish politics, and kind of whatever else. And I was quite bigoted, but understand I was looking for an identity. I was looking for something, and these folks at the mission would tell us about Jesus, and I'd be like, "What are you talking about? I'm a Christian. You know what I mean? I'm a Catholic. I'm not a Muslim. I'm a Christian. No, what are you talking about and all that?" But there was one woman there who made a huge impression on me, and she'd been a heroin addict for about 21 years. And she had done everything imaginable to get money for drugs, and here she was a volunteer now for Glasgow City Mission. She was over a year clean, and I mean, I didn't know anybody that get clean. Well, I knew people that went to the jail and they come out, you know, the bit of weight on them with all the steamed grub in the jail and brand new trainers and clays and that on, and, you know, I'm off it. But then maybe 5 or 6 weeks later, they're back on it and bang at it again. So I never really knew anybody that had really changed their life that way. And she would tell us, you know, been clean for over a year and whatever else, and, you know, what's made the difference in my life has been Jesus. And I'd be like, right, aye, Jesus, aye, right. But she spoke about Jesus as if she knew him, as if he was real. And one thing that always shone through was how much love and gratitude she had towards Jesus. Well, when you're talking with somebody like that, that's real like that, it cannot but have an effect on you. And so I used to go away wondering, I wonder if that Jesus knows for me. But I was kind of too caught up kind of in the life that I was living at the time to kind of really follow it through or kind of do anything about it. I got a house at the hostels. I got a house at the hostels in 1996, February the 16th, I think it was, February 16th, 1996, and staying in the Anderston area. So it's a wee bit away for the city, a wee bit away for that part of Anderston. Just where, you know, Mr. Singh's, the Indian restaurant, just at the right. So Mr. Singh's, you drive along Sauchiehall Street, Mr. Singh's is right at the corner, but that street there to the left, going down there, is called Eldersley Street, and that's where I stayed. It's a cracking big house. It was a cracking big house, and I had a girlfriend there. I had a girlfriend at the time as well, and she moved in with us, and, you know, I would have said that back then I would have had everything that I would have thought would have deemed me successful. You know, I had a house, I had a girlfriend, I even managed to begin to start working again, but I was still using drugs. I'm on methadone by this time. Started using methadone in the hostel. There was a boy who was getting methadone for his doctor, but he was getting to take it away for the chemist every day. He didn't have to drink it in the chemist every day. He was getting 60 ml a day, and he only needed 30, and he was giving me the other 30. So I was giving him something every time I got my gyro, and then you know, so I was getting into meth that way, and then drinking on tap it and smack and whatever else. And then I thought, I'm fed up paying you money. I'm just going to get my own script. And I went away. So I went away and got a methadone script. Now, methadone is part of our drug treatment services. It's meant to be used to wean drug addicts from heroin addiction. Well, I had no intentions of getting clean. You know, I was just wanting something for nothing. That's what I went for. So I never went on to the methadone program with the intentions of changing my life. I went on to the methadone program with the intentions of getting drugs for nothing. And most people I know, that's the truth, right? That's why they've went on kind of a methadone. So I'm on methadone, and, you know, but I'm still using in tap and all that as well. You know, get this girlfriend working, but I'm bumping money here, there and everywhere. I'm using in tap and all sorts of things. You know, all the stuff that happens in a relationship like that, the lies, the cheating, the betraying, you know, the half-truths, all sorts of stuff there. And it was, you know, that lasted for about 3 years. And then she left us. She left us, and you know, I was distraught. I was absolutely distraught. Rejection and all that. You know, I hated rejection. And so, what do you do with these things? Well, you know, the only thing I knew what to do with my feelings was, and my emotions, was to anaesthetise them. Because that's what I'd learnt over the years, right? I'd learnt, well, this is what you do with them. You just use till you don't feel anymore. I was going up. I went up and up and up on my methadone and whatever else. But one of the turning points for it wasn't the turning point, but one of the points of turning that, you know, eventually led to the actual turning point was a good pal, a very good pal. There's a guy from Blackhill, a guy called Terry Conley, a very good pal, you know, and Terry took me to stay in his house. Terry wasn't staying in Barlarnock anymore. He used to have a house in Pendine, 8 Pendine Road, above the old Haddles and that, before it all got pulled down. And but he was new staying in the house in Githamlock, I think. And Terry took me to stay with him. He's a good pal. I'm running about Blackhill again. I'm running about the pub up in Blackhill, and
Terry and Terry,
aye, and I'm running about up there again, and there's all sorts going on and whatever else, and my pals were drinkers and maybe smoked dope and whatever else, but I'll get to that. So I'm on the meth, and Terry took me to stay in his house, and I'll be eternally grateful for him doing that for us. He took me to stay in his house, and I think I was in 40 mil of meth a day. And the plan was I would come down 5 mil every 3 days, staying in Terry's house. I couldn't go anywhere, he'd batter me. Not allowed to go anywhere, staying with him, stuck to him. And I think by the end of 4 weeks, I was clean. But here's the thing. Here was me, I thought, I'm clean. That's me, I'm clean, great. I'm away for the junkie drugs. But I didn't understand, at Alcoholics Anonymous and places like that, they will tell you, if you don't pick up the first drink, if you don't pick up the first drug, then you can't get full of it, But I'd never heard anything like that. And so I just thought, well, that's me, I'm going to enjoy myself again. And what that meant was drinking, smoking dope, and taking ecstasies and all that again. And I was taking ecstasy during the day. People take ecstasy to go to the dancing. I was just taking it. I'd take it and sit in my wee brother's room. I was back staying in my ma's. I still had my house in Anderson, but I was back staying in my ma's. I had a good job in the railway. Ended up with a job in the railway, but it was casual. I was still getting my brew money as well, and I was a job in the railway, and I was going to work on the railway, shoveling and laying tracks, and I was full of ecstasy, taking ecstasy, just and what that meant as well was, like, my pal Terry and that, they didn't use drugs like me, or they didn't use the drugs that I used or whatever else, and I was ducking and diving and hiding for them, and whatever else, and That's what I did. Drugs was the number one thing to me. And so see, when I start using them, everything else takes a back seat. It takes right over. Everybody else becomes collateral damage. And they're even a friend like that, he stopped coming round for me because, he's away doing whatever he's doing. And that was me. I end up back staying in my own house, doing all sorts of stuff, and eventually I lost my job. In the railway. You do different training, and then every time you do training, you need to get drug tests. And I was ducking and diving the drug tests, and eventually, I think two non-appearances meant that they deemed that as a failure, and I got sacked for my job, kind of on the railway. And I went back to boozing. I was boozing all the time. I was in my house. I was going back down to the red light district. I was hanging about there, going about the soup kitchens and all that again, although I was still in my house. But I end up one night rolling about with the police. I was steaming, man, and I was playing I think Oasis music out my window. And it was blaring, man, and I was standing at the window like Liam Gallagher or something, and the police walked by. This police walked, and he's looking up, and he shouts up, turn that music down. And I'm shouting back. This was a nightmare. I'm shouting back, I can't hear you, pal. This music's a bit loud, just a total nightmare of a guy. And he's pressing my buzzer and all sorts. But I had a warrant out, and I thought, all right, I'm getting to jail. So I kind of went down, put my jacket and that on, and I kind of opened the closed door, and he just jumped on us, and I started rolling about with him. But I went and snapped ligaments in my ankle, and I was like, whoa, wait, I've broke something here, hold on and all that. I snapped the ligament in my ankle. I ended up vomiting in the clothes, getting took away in an ambulance and all that. And I just went and had a brand new pair of Nike Air Max trainees on that I just got out my ma's catalogue back in the day, you know, out the catalogue, pile them up. No, that's the way we used to do it back then. And when I got into the hospital, they had to cut them off us, man. A £90 pair of trainees cut right off us. So I got out with a stookie and all that on. I don't know, I never got lifted for the warrant. And here I was up at my doctor's, getting a sick line to get to the brew. Mm-hmm. And I met a guy that I used to use drugs with in the hostels. And now, you know, that was a kind of idea. I've been off smack and off opiates for about 2 years, right? But I'm using everything else. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm clean, right? And as somebody once said, you know, to get off heroin and start drinking, or to get off drink and start smoking dope, all you've really done is swap seats in the Titanic, right? You're still in a sinking ship. What you want to do is get off into the lifeboat of abstinence. You need to get in there. So I thought I was clean, but I wasn't clean. I was just as off my nut. And I bumps into this boy. I'm moaning about my leg. It's sore and all that. All they're getting is poxy, paracetamol, and And he went, Terry, the only thing I know that would take the pain away would be a wee bag. He was talking about heroin, you know. And I'd love to buy you a bag, usual story, but I've no money. And I went, it's mad, right? And I was like, I've got money in the house, come on. And that was me, kind of a back using smack. So I'm using smack. I'm going down to the soup kitchens again. And funnily enough, Pete, he was the same Christians on the same streets, doing and saying the same things. For them, nothing had changed. Mm-hmm. Jesus Christ, the same today, yesterday, today, and forever, right? And nothing had changed for me either. Nothing had changed for me either. Circumstances and whatever might have changed, but nothing had changed for me either, maybe except my level of desperation. So I'm going down to these soup kitchens and whatever else. It's funny, right, how you can be in something and accept the unacceptable. Here I was, I had nothing. All my money was gone in drugs. And I'd be sitting in my house, right? I had 2 tellies because one had a picture and the other one had sound, right? So you had to have the 2 tellies on at one time. The house is a nightmare, you know. There's probably tidier midden bins than the house, right? You can down to soup kitchens. You're getting rolls and sausage and cups of tea. You maybe go away with a few wee sandwiches in your bag and a cake, and they've maybe put some milk in a bottle for you and gave you some sugar. And then I've went up to my house via the Mitchell Library, outside the Mitchell Library, right? It's a cracking place for doubts, picking up doubts. And you would be picking up the old fag doubts, and getting dead picky because there was hunters. I don't take Benson and Hedges, only take Club, and putting them in your thing. Going home, hanging out all the doubts into a roll-up and whatever else, sitting back, house an absolute mess. I've got heroin in us and thinking, my life's all right, by the way. My life's great. See, when I think back to that boy, it's so sad, man. And there's thousands of people like that in our city today. I think, they're totally accepting the unacceptable. As C.S. Lewis said, I think we are a people who are easily satisfied, right? We're easily satisfied. And that was my life. That was my life.
So what changed?
Well, here's what changed. They Christians that I told you about, Hugh and Maureen, they left Glasgow City Mission in 1996. It's one thing having great relationships with people, but how do you change that or make that then into relationships, into rebuilding lives, right? And in many ways they were firefighting with the work at Glasgow City Mission. And remember, they too had drug and alcohol backgrounds, great experience of staying sober, staying clean, and great experience of the ultimate freedom and the ultimate being clean in Jesus. And so what they did was they left the work at Glasgow City Mission and they set up a new charity called the Open Door Trust. Now, the Open Door Trust had two strands to it. They had the reaching out, and they'd done that through street work. They'd done it through a big lunch club. They'd done it through an introduction, a Bible study in Berlin prison, a drug group in Low Moss prison. I always loved that, you know. Even the guys that ended up in jail, the guys that were homeless ended up in jail. Everywhere they went, the Christians were there. The Christians there again, you know. Hugh used to say, "I'll wear you down before you wear me down," you know. And so they had set up, so there was the reaching out, but then there was the rebuilding side, and the rebuilding side was like community rehab. So you get residential rehab where people go and stay. Well, this was support in the community. So people came into the centre during the day. They would get things today to provide them structure. So it's one thing to put down drinking drugs, right? But see, just no drinking and drugging, it's a negative, sterile thing. You know what the Lord Jesus says, you know, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, if you clear an evil spirit out of a house and you sweep it clean and you don't fill it with good things, well, he's going to come back with his pals, his 7 pals, right? And man, what a party they're going to have. So just no drinking, just being clean is not enough. Our strapline for my charity, Hope For Glasgow, is clean and connected. So just being clean is not enough. You need to get connected. You need to fill your time because, you know, being a drug addict or being an alcoholic, it's a 24/7 job, right? It fills your time. It gives you a purpose. You've got to get up. You've got to go out. You've got to get money together. You've got to go in school. You've got to use. And then you can't enjoy your using before you're thinking about where's the next one coming from. So it occupies you 24/7. So when you know news, don't just use, you're like, is that it? So you need structure, you need things today. And so if folks would go in and they would get wee bits of cleaning and whatever else today, they'd get lunch and whatever else, but it would always be where it was an introduction to spiritual recovery, which would be like something maybe based on Mark's gospel, introducing people to Jesus, or some sort of a practical kind of a recovery group. So they had been doing that since 1997. So we're now in 2001, and I'm back in the tune. I've still got my house, which is no far for the city centre, and I'm back using smack, and I've been doing it in the street, going to the lunch club and all sorts of stuff. And it'd been 6 or 7 years since I had been with them, and they remembered me. And, you know, they said, Terry, great to see you. We pray for you. We've prayed for you for years. And that woman that I told you about, you know, the woman that I told you about that made a big impression on me, I celebrated my 21st birthday when I was homeless, and I'd never had a birthday cake my whole life, right? Blackhill boy, never had a birthday cake. And I was going up to the mission this night, and there was boys coming back the way, and they said, Mags has got you a birthday cake. And I became so self-obsessed that I went back the way and didn't go, and I left it for a few nights. But she had me a birthday cake, and there was a real mini car on it which said 21 on it. I've still got that somewhere in the house, that wee car. But you know, that really meant something to me. You know, it's a small thing, but a huge thing. You know, wee things like that. You know, she said, we've prayed for you for years. So here's what changed. So that was all happening. They were still in the streets, and it was them that I was going to. I was going to other places as well, but it was them I was going to. So I goes down onto the streets. Must have been the end of August 2001, and I was clean, but it wasn't by choice. I didn't have any money, and so I'm down into the red light district to the soup kitchen, hoping maybe to see somebody that could square me up, or maybe somebody I could rob. And I'm hanging about the soup kitchen. But here I found myself talking to one of these Christians. I was trying to get a tenner off him. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to get a tenner off him. But telling him about, you know, giving him the poor me's about, you know, I don't really want this life anymore and blah, blah, blah and all that stuff. And he said to me, could I pray with you? And I thought, fair enough, because I thought if I let him pray with us, then maybe he would give us a tenner. You know what I mean? I'd maybe be able to, right, mate, all right, I really felt Jesus there, all right, give us a tenner, pal, all right, I'll come to your church. No one of the ones. Tell people anything, right, to get what you want. And he prayed with his people. Now, I prayed all the time. I've prayed millions of times before, God going to get me out of this? You know, locked up in Easterhouse Police Office or Bird Street Police, God going to get us out of this? You know, people you know are going to do you in because you've tanned all the bill money or whatever else, or you've bumped somebody, you're going to get done in. God going to get me out of this? And I never have thought about God again. But this guy started to pray. I can't remember what he prayed. But Terry McCutcheon, I believe, for the first time ever, really prayed that night. And I think it was just something like this: God, I don't even know if you're there. I mean, for all my religion and external stuff, external religion, I don't know if you're there. I don't know if this Jesus character's true or real or whatever. But this character seems to think he is. and here's what I said: see if you're there, gonna gi'e a horn. No, there was no bolts of lightning. There was nothing like that. But I went home that night and I slept. First day coming off of heroin, I slept. Never been known. Back down, I didn't use the next day, back down onto the streets, back down to the soup kitchen, whatever else. I didn't even have an urge to use. I went home, slept again. Went to the lunch club on the Wednesday. The lunch club was based out of St Vincent Street Free Church, just kind of there across from King Tut's there on St Vincent Street. And went to the lunch club, ate 2 dinners. A pudding, whatever else. Then after the lunch club, what they used to have for anybody that wanted to come, a drug and alcohol recovery group. It was an open group, anybody could go, and I went to the group. They invited me to come the next day, Thursday. We're going to go to the sports centre, Terry. Would you like to come? Sure. Now that was my payday, and back then in 2001, it was still a gyro. So I got my gyro. But again, gyro. I was 4 days clean. I didn't even feel like using. And I went to the sports centre, had lunch, whatever else. I went up to my ma's. I always owed her money. I was up to give my ma the money that I owed her and whatever else. And she said, there's a letter there for you. I picked it up. It was a cheque. It was a tax rebate. Remember, I was working on the railway, but I had my real national insurance number in, but I wasn't books in. It was casual, and I was still claiming Bruma, and I got a tax rebate. How did I get a tax rebate? Please don't nobody stick me in it. Please don't phone Centre 1 and stick us in. But there was a tax rebate there for about 95 quid, and see the extra money put me on the edge. It began to put things in my mind. And I went down into the tune and got one of these fast cash check places, and I got about 80 odd quid. Well, that along with the money that I had for my gyro, and I went away and I used smack the Thursday, the Friday, the Saturday, the Sunday. In the Thursday, the Christians had told me, come back on the Monday, come back here on Monday, 1 o'clock, bowl of soup, Bible study. And the Monday, it was Monday the 3rd of September 2001, I wondered, well, should I go and all that. I went, well, I'll go because I've no money left anyway. So I kind of, but I wondered what happened to me last week. How did I manage to do 4 days and whatever? But anywho, I goes up, I presses the bell in the lane there at the back of St Vincent Street Free Church, and Hugh McKenna opened the door. And he went, Terry, good to see you. And I said to him, no, but Pete, see, for the first time in my life, I was honest about my drug use, about what I'd used, when I'd used, and whatever. And see if anybody is going to get free for anything, whatever it might be, whether it's a particular sin or a drug addiction or whatever, you need to be honest. I would always say, see if you're not honest about the last time you had a drink or a drug, then you've not had a drink or a drug for the last time. Now, we don't need a perfect confession of everything in our lives, but you can be honest with me, and if I say to you, have you had a drink today, you can be 100% honest about that, right? You need to be honest. First and foremost, you need to be honest about where you're at. And for the first time in my life, I was honest. I said, Hugh, I've been using smack for the last 4 days since I seen you, man. And he said, have you used smack today? I says, no. He says, well, you're in the right place. Come in. And that was Monday the 3rd of September. And due to the great goodness and kindness and grace of God, I've never used anything again ever since. So I was there, and now this time I was there the full week, Monday through Friday, 5 days clean. And I wondered, what am I going to do? Well, this place doesn't open till Monday. What am I going to do? And one of the guys said to me, would you like to come to church on Sunday? And I says, do you mean chapel? And he went, no, church, still a bigot in us. And he kind of knew I was swithering. And he said to me, do you like Indian food? I said, aye, but I only like lambuna. And he says, well, I'll take you for something to eat first. And I says, fine, I'm in. And he took me to the Koh-i-Noor, which is I think it was the oldest Indian curry shop in Glasgow, opened in the 60s. But I think it's shut now. I think it's all boarded up. But he took me there at Charing Cross. He took me there, and then he took me to a church on the south side. It was a Pentecostal church. He kind of took us there, and I loved it. There was live music and whatever else, and guitars and all sorts of things, and it was brilliant. The music was great, and then the guy preached and whatever else. I was 7 days clean. But I would say this, see, when I get clean, you begin to find out that you're no clean. Sometimes that happens quicker in people than other people, right? But you begin to thaw out. See, when you're on drugs, you're numb. So like an ice cube when it's in the freezer, it's frozen, it's numb. That's what you're like when you're drinking drugs, right? But see, when you take the ice cube out the freezer and you place it on the kitchen table, it begins to thaw out. I mean, it doesn't become water immediately. It begins to thaw out. Well, when the drug addicts or the alcoholics stop drinking or drugging, stop partaking in their addiction, they begin to thaw out. And as I said earlier, there's good news and bad news about getting clean and thawing out. The good news is you get your feelings back, and the bad news is you get your feelings back. Stop taking drugs, stop drinking, you'll feel better. And that's true. You feel your guilt better. You feel your shame better. And see that emptiness, wee boy at 15, you feel your emptiness better, right? So what I was doing all my life was burying stuff alive. But then when you stop using, it comes back to the surface. So I would say that when I got clean, I found out I wasn't clean. Beginning to think back to things that you've done, things that have been done to you, full of anger, full of rage, full of resentment, full of guilt and shame, full of emptiness, all that stuff. And here I was in this church. I don't remember much about the sermon, but here's what I remember. Right at the end, the fella did, right, close your eyes and bow your heads, and there's a wee bit of piano playing or whatever. And he said something like this, this evening I've been telling you about Jesus, about how he made the love of the Father known. He come to die for us and die on the cross. And, there's people in here tonight that don't know Jesus. And so if you want to come to know Jesus, if you want Jesus to be known, put up your hand. And I've got my eyes shut, just like the rest of them. And there must have been people putting up their hands in that, and he was saying, I see you, sir, put your hand back down. See you, missus, whatever. And I'm sitting there, and my belly was all gone. There was butterflies in my stomach, man. I was like, what's that all about, man? And he said he then says, there's somebody else in here who needs to know Jesus. And Pete, I put my horn up, right? But Ephesians chapter 2 says that we're dead in sin, right? So you're dead. A dead person can't do anything. A dead person doesn't hear conversations. They don't feel, and they certainly can't lift their hands. The very fact that I put my hand up, I believe that Jesus had already come to me. Mm-hmm. Jesus had already come to me, and it was like it was even without even my knowledge or anything. It came in. I was sitting going, I remember sitting thinking, see, for all my outward religion, Jesus hasn't changed my life. I remember the story as a case because I'm a wee toty guy. I remember as a case, but Jesus changed him. He was transformed. And I'm like, I don't have that. So sitting there in my chair, I suppose through the power of the Holy Spirit, I came to know Jesus is what you need. And, I put my horn up. But before Terry McCutcheon had put his horn up and accepted Jesus, Jesus had already spread his horns out and accepted Terry McCutcheon. And so in order for something to become clean, something else has to become unclean, or something else has to become dirty. You wash your face in the morning, the water's clean, your face is dirty. You wash your face, the water becomes dirty, your face becomes clean. There's a transfer takes place. Well, very simply, that's the centrality of the Christian gospel. For God made him, that is Jesus, for God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So Jesus dirtied himself with all my sin so that I might be made clean. So that was the 9th of September 2001, and I've never looked back. I got right involved at the Open Door Trust, learning about myself, learning about my addiction, but most importantly, learning about the God who made me and what he desired and what he commanded for my life. And so I spent about 16 months there in the groups of the Open Door Trust, and then in January 2003 they offered us a job. And I began to work there, working in the streets, working in the groups, working in the prisons, taking the recovery groups and stuff like that. But all the while, making sure that I didn't pick up. And the best way that I knew how not to pick up was get to know more about Jesus. That's the greatest thing for me. And the emptiness. God has set eternity in the hearts of men, Ecclesiastes 3:11. So it's only something eternal that can fill it. But here was my big problem. In Romans chapter 1, it talks about how we exchange the glory of the Creator for created things. There's nothing wrong with created things. It's just the priority that we place upon them, or the importance we place upon. And I had things all the wrong way about. It's meant to be God first and then everything else. But I was always looking for created things to satisfy me, created things to fulfill me, created things to give me a sense of purpose and identity. But you don't get them for created things. You only get them, for the Creator. And, I spent about 5 years at the Open Door Trust working there. It was brilliant, loved it. So it was great for me because... I was a young Christian. I was, young in recovery sense. Not that long away from drugs. And so for 2001, for September 2001 to September 2007, my whole life was spent round about the Open Door Trust, going in there every day and stuff, and going to church as well.
Is this the charismatic church still at that point? Is that right?
Yeah, I was going there. That was my church. I became a member there. I was baptised there. But because of the teaching, the good teaching I was getting in the Open Door Trust, there was good Bible people, and the teaching in the charismatic Pentecostal church wasn't heresy, but it was very thematic. I know that you're big on expository preaching, right? You take a book of the Bible and you work your way through it, right? Because this book has got a message for today, and so you work your way through it, a few verses or a chapter or whatever. So I knew that God had gave us the Bible in a certain way, and so it needed to be taught in a certain way, and I knew that because of the good people I had run about us at the Open Door Trust, and so I was going along to the Tron. I was going along to the Tron, as it was in the day back in Buchanan Street, and the Tron was very middle class.
Who was the minister at that point?
Sinclair Ferguson, right? Who I love Sinclair, man. Absolutely love him, man. But I found the whole process absolutely excruciating, right? Because I'm a wee Glasgow guy, talk like a wee Glasgow guy, and never done anything with my life, and it's quite middle class, doctors, lawyers, students, hundreds of students, and we even had a sir there. Sir David McNee was a member there, and he had been the top cop in the Metropolitan Police, right? And I would often say that, whereas a wee drug addict for Blackhill have the same, what does he have in common with the top cop in the Metropolitan Police? Well, one is an up and out and the other is a down and out, but without Jesus, both of them are out, right? So no matter who we are, the gospel's a great leveler. So I was going along there, and it was Sinclair that kept me going to the Tron, because I found it excruciating, because it was all people that weren't like me, and it spoke very proper and all that, and their kids were all going to university and all this malarkey, and probably I probably didn't like the students, probably because I knew I'd wasted my life. I probably knew I was smart as them, but probably so I probably had a resentment against myself. But the thing that kept me going back was Sinclair's preaching, and that was just so good for me, because it gave me biblical convictions and gospel clarity, which I owe Sinclair just so much, you know. So I'm still in the Tron today, but I'm really at the Tron, you know, because of Sinclair. So he kept me going back. So I ended up, I joined the Tron in 2003. I think I joined in May 2003, and then I think Sinclair left in July.
The final straw, hey?
I don't think it was anything to do with me, but so that was so that took us to the Tron, and you know, I was still working at the Open Door Trust at that time, but then the new minister was Wally Phillip, and Wally came in August 2004. So Wally's nearly been at the Tron for 17 years, and it's funny that, right? Because different ministers or different leaders that you've had there, they bring different things to you, and you know, Sinclair got me going to the Tron, but that was God preparing me for Wally coming, because you know, everything in ministry wise and teaching me about ministry and all that stuff, I owe Wally everything, man. I owe him just so much.
Which is funny as well, because Willie would be culturally miles away from you as well, eh? I mean, if Sinclair is, then Willie's he's like a doctor, and like
a brain the size of a planet, right? And but dead down to earth, and you know, dead focused, and you know, and what he's doing. He's got a plan, and he knows what he's doing. Like Mez, right? Like a posh Mez, right? There is a posh Mez, isn't there, on the Twitter or something like that? Posh, a classy Mez or something.
Don't know who holds that.
So similar in lots of ways. But Wally, so Wally had come, and he had been doing in London, the Proclamation Trust, and they had the whole Cornhill training course, and Wally was keen. Wally was keen to get something like that going.
Is he, like, where's Willie from? Is he Scottish? Or?
Oh, aye, Edinburgh.
Okay.
So his dad.
So English then?
Aye. His dad was James Phillip.
I knew that, yes.
And was a minister at Holyrood Abbey for about 50 years, right? And what a tremendous ministry that man had. But Wally comes 2004, sets up the Cornhill training course, first year, 2006 to 2007, and you know, he was keen for me to do it, and I was like, you know, I've got a burden for drug addicts. I'm here working at the Open Door Trust because, and I would have liked to have done it. I went down to London for some summer school. You done it for a week in 2005, and thought, maybe I'd like to do that at some point, but I think it would have to be alongside the work that I do at the Open Door Trust. But as things transpired, I left the Open Door Trust in 2007 and signed up to the Cornhill training course full time. And I signed up for 2 years. 1 year was called an apprentice. And I always found that funny, Pete, you know, me with my big Celtic, Catholic, Irish political background, and knew I was an apprentice boy, right?
The Lord does amazing things, doesn't he?
It's so funny, man. So I done that, you know, was on the Cornhill training course for a year, and really it's a course that seeks to for folks to be equipped and competence in the scriptures and confidence kind of in the scriptures, and so it was all built around how would you preach and how would you teach this and that, and then I worked as a year as an apprentice, and then I wondered, what am I going to do next? I've still got a burden for drug addicts. That's never left me. Still got a burden for people like me from my background. It's never left me. But here am I. I've begun to teach the Bible. I've preached it. I've already preached at the Tron by this point. In fact, the first sermon I preached at the Tron was January 2008. Yeah. Aye. And that always blows my mind, right? Because as you know, the Tron's got a history of tremendous preachers, right? Wally Phillip, Sinclair Ferguson, Eric Alexander, George Duncan, Tom Allen.
It's amazing how far you can fall, isn't it?
Exactly. And then, you know, that's a wonderful thing, right? You know, Ephesians 2, we spoke about that earlier. But some folks come to me and they say, you know, I wish I had a testimony like you. You know, I wish I had been a Hell's Angel or something, or I wish I had been a junkie or whatever, right? But everybody who's a Christian's testimony is there in Ephesians chapter 2, right? What were we all? Well, the situations and circumstances might have been different, but God's interested in where we were spiritually. And Ephesians 2 says, and as for you, you were dead. So before you're made alive in Jesus, you're dead. Now, there's no degrees of deadness, isn't there? No, I mean, you're either dead or you're no deed. There's no degrees of deadness, but there's degrees of rigor mortis. Everybody who's a Christian's testimony is there contained in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1 to 10. You were dead. That's what life was like. What happened? God made you alive. And what life is like now? Well, hopefully, verse 10, walking in the good works that God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them, right? And so Alan and Duncan and Ferguson and Alexander and Philip, they were all dead at one point, and God made them alive, right? Just the same as me. So Wally opened his pulpit in 2008, and there I was, wee heroin addict that was now a Christian, preaching. It's wonderful, being able to say anything about Jesus.
And that must be almost back to where we're starting in terms of 2009 was when I met you, when I was in Greyfriars. You were preaching one Sunday, and I still remember, first time I heard just really clear expository preaching, Bible, gospel sermon. You used the whole illustration with the DVD. I still remember that. You had a DVD you brought. You're like, imagine all your life was on this, and which is not far then. If you were starting 2008, I was in Berlin from 2009, kind of not far from the same point.
Aye, was I? That's right.
And then it's just, do you want to give us a quick brief from what happened to then to what you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. 2009, the apprenticeship finishes. What am I going to do? Will I go and work for a church full time, or will I go back to working in the addiction field full time? Well, I got the opportunity to do both. So I worked part time as an addiction worker in a secular rehab. It's a cross-reach rehab called Rainbow House. Really? And I worked there part-time, 2 days a week. And then the other part-time, I worked at the Tron. I worked at the Tron part-time. And then after that 2 years, so that took me to 2011, Cornhill began a new venture called the Pastor's Training Course. And that was more further theological training for those that had maybe been on the Cornhill training course. But you've got to be working in ministry. You've got to have done Cornhill, and you can go on the pastor's training course. And that was 3 years, so it was like a class setting where it's on-the-job training. So it was every Friday. So every Friday it was either a study day at home or a day in the class. And it was for 3 years. And at 3 times throughout the year, we had residential weeks where we went for a week intensive training or teaching, instruction, and some of the big names for Christendom would come and teach us. So guys like Richard Pratt, Alistair Begg, Dave Cook, Dale Ralph Davis, Don Carson, Dick Lucas, all these guys kind of came and done a week with us and stuff. So during that time, I'm working at the Tron as the Associate Minister for Pastoral and Social Care. And what that meant was I was we had lots of pastoral care teams, and it was my job to keep in touch with all the care teams. And if somebody needed the minister to visit, then I was the guy. And I'd done pastoral visiting a couple of days a week myself, which meant I was also responsible for all the funerals taken at the Tron during that 5-year period, as well as preaching and teaching. And I also did a couple of groups a week for men with addiction issues. So I done that. I ended up working at the Tron full time for 5 years. Set up like a kind of a service called Tron at 2, which was meant to be like a bridge, a kind of a bridge service. We had that on a Sunday. And
that's when you gave out the kind of cord jackets and stuff to people in the way.
Aye, and the chinos and all that stuff. No, there was none of that malarkey. But that was meant to try and be like a bridge service, because most people from my background, maybe not so much now. I don't think it's less stuffy, but still, for somebody like me, for a housing scheme and for the background that I've come from, they would find. They just would, right? It's not against the Tron or anything, but they would just find it a bit stuffy, right? And so we had this service so that the folks could be in the church, meet the church, i.e. the people, and they feel comfortable in the thing. We gave them soup, bread, and maybe a pudding, but there would always be a service, kids talk, everything, sermon and all that, singing hymns. But the burden to reach those in addiction, Pete, has never left me. It's always been a huge burden, and that was partly, I was allowed to, in many ways, make my job at the Tron, and that's partly kind of what I did. But I was doing 3 different things. I was doing the drug stuff, I was doing the pastoral care stuff, and then I was doing the preaching and teaching stuff. So I was doing lots of different things. And the one thing, by the way, that a drug addict needs, remember I said earlier on, they need structure. The biggest commodity that any is have got that a drug addict needs is time. And when you're working full-time in a church, you know yourself, time is at a premium, right? You don't have time. And I couldn't say to the drug addicts, you remember coming, Tuesday and Thursday are my days for use. The boys are in need. So in many ways, I was doing them a disservice. And so that the pastor's training course, I suppose maybe you end up thinking, well, you've got to become a pastor. And I knew I was never going to be a pastor in the sense that you're a pastor, working in the scriptures every week, preaching and teaching sermons every week. That I knew that was never going to be me, and it wasn't what I felt God was calling us to. So I've always been praying, right? What am I doing with this burden? And praying about it, talking about it to my wife, my best mate. But in 2016, at this time as well, every year for the past 6 years, our drug deaths have broke records every year, and so much so now that we're the drug death capital in Europe, and statistically the world as well, Scotland. And so the burden was there, and I spoke to the leadership in the Tron about it, and Wally said to me, 2 years ago, Terry, I would have said no chance, no, but I think the time's right. And so the Tron set me free for me to leave my job as an associate minister to set up my own charity called Hope For Glasgow.
I want to talk about that briefly for 2 minutes, but first, Reagan, could you please text Pete and Cara and tell them to pick up my kids from school? Because I'm not going to do that because I got out of school in 2 minutes. So just make sure they will, that'd be great. That's cool though, we knew this might happen. Briefly then, tell us Vision Hope For Glasgow. So 2016?
2016,
that kind of started, and I've heard you talk about that before, and I love Vision for it, but also like how the local church goes hand in hand with that. So do you want to just tell a little bit about the vision and how what you're hoping to do?
Aye, sure. So Hope For Glasgow, and the hope in Hope For Glasgow is the hope in the gospel of the Lord Jesus. That is the hope and Hope For Glasgow. But we're a total abstinence day programme. So normally, sometimes, I think I've said this already, is that you would get residential rehab where somebody goes and stays, they get taken out of the community, they maybe go and stay there for six months of the year. Well, what we are is community-based. We're based in the city centre, just along from Charing Cross, which means that we are very accessible for anywhere in Glasgow. So we're only one bus journey away for anywhere in Glasgow, including Blackhill and Baileyson and all these areas, and even further afield. What that also means is, because we're based in the city centre, I'm not working out of Blackhill, I'm not working out of Blackhill. There's things about schemes where folks will say, well, I'm not going there. No, does it just create a logistical problem, i.e. that we maybe need to get 2 buses or 3 buses, but there's also just a kind of a territorial thing, right? No going there, no chance am I going there. So being in the city centre, we don't need to deal with all that rubbish. So we're based in the city centre. The guys come to us during the day, they get input, support, group work, accountability, one-to-ones. They go back home at night. I think I said this to you earlier. What I like about this model is this model values the input of the local church. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, the Apostle Paul reminds us about the background, the folks that comprised the Corinthian church. They were sexually immoral, they were revilers, they were swindlers, they were drunkards. And I always like to focus on what the Bible doesn't say sometimes, right? Because it helps you appreciate what it does say. And the Apostle Paul doesn't say to the drunkards, hey, and wasn't it good that we were able to send you away to a rehab in Athens for 6 months while you get yourself sorted? No. The Apostle Paul says that they were washed, they were cleansed, they were sanctified in Jesus. Where? In Corinth, in the community of the local church. So see the place where they were running about causing all sorts of damage and, God was able to change them right there. There was no need to send them away. Now, in some cases there is a need, right, to send, but no every case is a case where people can get sent away. And so what I love about our model is people can come to us and get input and support off of us while at the same time still get the input and the support for their trusted leaders in the church, which they probably wouldn't get if they went away to rehab. They would be totally taken away from them. So our strapline is clean and connected. So our hope for everybody who uses our services is that they'll become clean for all substances, including alcohol. We promote total abstinence, clean from all substances and connected to their families, their communities, a local church, and ultimately to the Lord Jesus. So you could say clean from substances and connected to support, clean from sin and connected to the Saviour. So it's not one or other, it's both. We teach both at the same time. But I suppose the biggest thing for us, Pete, is the theology that kind of underpins what we're doing, and we would view addiction biblically. Addiction in any shape or any form, whether it's drink, whether it's drugs, whether it's sex, pornography, whether it's food, whether it's chasing money. The Bible has got lots to say about addiction. In fact, you'd hardly turn a page in the scriptures without it, talking about addiction or the human condition, right? My wee mate, wee Robert was in McDonald's one night, and he was with another boy, and the boy goes to Narcotics Anonymous. And they left McDonald's. They bump into this lassie goes to NA, and she says, "Oh, yous have just been for something to eat. Oh, great. What yous up to now?" And the wee guy that goes to NA, he says, "I'm going to an NA meeting." And this lassie says to Robert, "Are you going with him?" And Robert says, "No, I'm going to a Bible study." And she done this. A Bible study? A Bible study? What's the Bible got to do with addiction? And Robert answered in the way that only wee Robert could. Robert says, "What's the Bible got to do with addiction? Well, apart from every page, nothing." Do you know what I mean? So the Bible speaks fuller, clearer, deeper than any other book. There's lots of books out there that are helpful. The AA book and the Narcotics Anonymous basic text, they're helpful. But they don't speak clearly with the clarity that the scriptures speak on. So we teach that at the root of addiction is choice, sin, false worship, and ultimately idolatry. Whoa. People in churches have said to me, "Whoa, you teach that? You tell a drug addict on day one you're an idolater?" I says, "Yeah." And they go, "Wow, whoa. Do you not think they've been stigmatised enough that you're going to do that?" And I would say, my friend, the gospel understanding of anything is never bad news. Amen. The gospel understanding of things is always good news. And in fact, if at the root of addiction is false worship and idolatry, then guess what's at the root of the solution? True worship. That's why Jesus makes a difference. That's why at the root of addiction, it's no sickness, it's sin. Now, we could go up to the Beatson, me, you and Regan. We could go up to the Beatson cancer ward, right? Now, these people are sick. Some of them are sick terminally. And we could share the gospel with them, right? And we'd maybe get an audience because he's a big Texan. And we get an audience and the woman would love him. And, but let's just say one of these wee women gets converted, right? She gets soundly converted. Well, unless God miraculously moved in her life, she would still have cancer. Why? Well, because cancer's a health issue. But see if a drug addict gets soundly converted, I would expect with the right input and the right support, they would get clean. Why? Well, because addiction is a heart issue. It's an issue of the heart. Yes, there's health issues connected with it, but ultimately it's a heart issue. It's dealing with our desires, right? And so, God asks his people that all the way through the scriptures, right? Whom will you worship? Where is your heart? Where is your heart? So that's what we go for. We want to deal with it here, and we want them to stay off of drugs. We want them to be clean, but ultimately we want them to be connected. And so we have our city centre thing, which is our day programme. But, you said that the important thing is, I don't want people in Hope for Glasgow. I want people rooted in the local church, because I know that ultimately in the local church, the best thing to deal with idolatry is worship. Worship is the best weapon against idolatry. And when you're part of a worshipping congregation that preach and teach the scriptures and teach the Bible, you learn to worship God. You learn to worship him in every area of your life. It's where you're reminded of the Christ who died for you. And it's where you meet with fellow idolaters. Now, there's circumstances and backgrounds may be different, but that's what we do Sunday by Sunday. Idolaters meet Sunday by Sunday, and another idolater stands up and he opens the scriptures and he speaks and he preaches about the one who's able to deal with all the idolatries and all the sins of our hearts. So we're dead keen that people get rooted in the local church. And so before lockdown, we would have had 4 support groups, evening support groups that are held in partnership with Bible teaching churches throughout Glasgow. So anybody can come to them. But the guys on our day programme, as well as coming to the day programme, if they're on the day programme, they need to attend at least 2 of these meetings a week. And they're in Bible. We would only partner with churches that we say the Bible gets taught well there, because that's what the boys need, right? Why should they go somewhere else? The teaching the Bible is the most important thing, and the boys, that's where the boys' strength will be. That's where they'll be prepared for fighting the battle. But obviously during lockdown, things have changed a wee bit. So we have our support groups, our evening support groups. They're on Zoom 3 nights a week, a Monday, a Tuesday and a Thursday night. And, this kind of a lockdown and isolation, it's actually led for us to worldwide connectedness. So we've got people coming on our meetings. There's a guy from London who's a Christian. He was a Christian, got clean, became a Christian, and then, went back into addiction and struggled for about 4 years trying to get sober. Gone to a good church and whatever else, but just couldn't get sober. And he's been using our online meetings since the start of lockdown. But he was 8 months again sober again the other day, but back rooted in the local church. Get married in December, so that's fantastic.
There's a guy from Didry as well, isn't there? One of the guys. Roy Bingham now. Steve McCutcheon.
Stevie, the Guffey. Stevie's on, brilliant. There's a few folks. There's a couple of the lassies. There's a couple of the lassies for Nidri coming on. There's a wee lassie for Gracemount who's been on, and a few of the guys for Nidri and Bingham are coming on. And we just want to serve the church, Pete. We are a para-church in the truest sense. And I think, I love the church. Jesus died for the church, and the church is the only organisation in the world that God has promised to bless. And I want people in the church. If Hope for Glasgow grows big, that's great. But it will mean, I hope, that we're getting more people into local worship and congregations of the Lord Jesus. And that's our hope for folks.
Listen, mate, I really appreciate that. I'm really excited to see what the Lord's already done and what he's going to do, because we found it really hard as a church who wants to teach the Bible, who wants to put the gospel up front and centre, to see people that have similar convictions, both about what addiction is and how we can bring people to Jesus and see Jesus save people out of addiction, but also about what the church is. And it's rare, I think, to see a church, a charity that is got a solidly biblical idea of addiction, but also sees itself. And there's nothing wrong with the parachurch when it knows it's the parachurch.
Definitely.
It's whenever the parachurch thinks it could be the church is the problem, isn't it? And so it's that idea of knowing that there's a need and there's a skill set and a ministry you can provide that we can't. We don't have maybe that experience or that time or whatever. But also when that works hand in hand with the local church and people could come here and get that discipleship and the preaching, and I think it's great. Really encouraged.
You don't get too far into the Church in Hard Places book. And Mez tells a story about being with a group of students or something who were doing some missionary work or something. And the line goes something like, they were dead down in the church, right? And I've been involved in parachurch organisations, and I've heard things like, if only the church would do its job right, then we wouldn't need to exist. And I'm like, what a load of baloney. Hope for Glasgow exists because the church has done its job right. Ephesians chapter 4 says that the Lord has given us prophets, apostles, pastors, teachers and evangelists. What for? To equip the saints for works of ministry, right? So can you imagine a guy in Japan who's a missionary saying, if only the church would have done its job right, I wouldn't need to be here. He's there because the church did do its job right. And I would always say this to pastors and ministers. You've only got one non-negotiable, and that's to preach the word in season and out of season. Sometimes what happens in churches is when it's a one-man band, everybody looks to the minister. He's to do everything. No, that's not the biblical way. The biblical way is he preaches, he's set aside Sunday by Sunday to ensure that we have a strong pulpit, the word is taught faithfully Sunday by Sunday, and that's meant to equip us. So, we're meant to be partners in the gospel, no passengers, right? We're meant to be partners. So the people in the pew, we're all the minister. We're all the minister. Minister just means kind of a servant. And so we very much, we love the church, and we understand as a parachurch organisation, we are there to serve the church. Because as I said, somebody who's trying to get clean for drugs, they need input every day. And so that's difficult, right? You got a lot of time.
We say that, if all we're doing as a church is expecting, someone to come to know Jesus and then, leave all your community, all your life, behind and come here on a Wednesday night and a Sunday morning, then they've got no chance. No. We need to have that in our lives, day in, day out, discipleship and living for Jesus. But as churches it's hard to do that, right? And so that's where I guess, again, really appreciate that your heart and vision for that, so that particularly where there's times in people's lives we need that intensive discipleship. Most churches can't provide that. But to know that you guys are willing to do that whilst at the same time connecting folk to the local church, I love it.
Yeah, it's the, that's the vision, right? Because and even like Hope for Glasgow, we're word ministry. I would say we're word ministry to drug addicts, right? We come under that section. We're word ministry to drug addicts, but never just be content for drug addicts to have, a support group, even if it is biblical and everything else. They need to be rooted in the local church, right? Because the body. Or the different people, different backgrounds, and different accents or whatever else, having different opportunities. That's what the church is, and that's where we want. That's where we want folks to be. Just before lockdown, we opened our 4th meeting in partnership with Greenview Church, Colin Adams Church. And the thing that excited us about that meeting was all of my day programme is for men only, and all of my evening meetings up until that point had been for men only. But the Greenview Church, we opened a meeting that was for men and women. And that was because Greenview had an existing addiction outreach thing that hadn't met for about 2 years. But I didn't want to go in and start something, and the women in that area taking a resentment with Greenview because knew they were working with Hope for Glasgow, and Hope for Glasgow only deal with men. So I decided, because there was an existing ministry there, that I would open it up for women. But we only get 4 weeks in. 4 Mondays in before lockdown hit, and so we moved everything kind of onto Zoom. But last year, in 2020, 160 different people accessed Hope for Glasgow services, whether that be our day services or our evening services. 160 different people, and 30 of them were women. Awesome. And so that's what we're doing now. We've already canvassed everybody who comes on, and the next thing that we want to do is we need to add a women's worker, so that, because women, they're different from men, and if I had to put one woman one woman into my drug recovery group, you know,
Change everything.
aye, she could be the ugliest woman in the world, right? But it would upset the dynamic because all of a sudden, you know, this guy's, you know, he fancies his chances and that one fancy his chances, but they two have been blown out because she's with him. And especially a woman coming out of addiction, she uses the greatest gift that God gave her, which is her manipulation. And she'll have those guys kind of eating out her hand, right? Because when it comes to women, us guys are just stupid with that, right? So we're working hard at, you know, we've got the funds there, but we just try to get the operational things and how will it work. We've done a lot of thinking through, you know, we're going to mix it, we're going to keep it separate. And I think where I've got to now is I think we want to keep it separate initially. We'll start small and see if we can build it up. But really what we're wanting to do is, you know, some of the women that are coming on might feel uncomfortable talking to me. I mean, I'd be all right with it, but, you know, there's just particular things. It's just better to kind of talk to a woman. So our immediate thing is ensuring that we've got more sources of support for the ladies who are already coming on. So that's what we've been doing. We've been, you know, doing that for 4.5 years now. You know, I'm supported by a godly board of directors. The staff team's been growing since then. Got 2 guys who addiction workers who do the groups and stuff. I got a lady, Colin Adams' wife, Nikki. She does two days a week for us, admin, and another lady who keeps the books and stuff like that. And God's people have been, you know, amazing to us. You know, folks say to us, where do you get your funding for? Well, because Jesus is front and centre, we would not, you know, all this new money, you know, drug deaths, you know, we're the drug death capital of the world. And, you know, it's funny, the guy who was the drug minister, right, he got sacked, right, because the drug deaths were so terrible. And Dundee, which is the second highest city for drug deaths in Scotland, Dundee re-elected this guy. You know, this is not a political statement, right? But I think they just seen SNP and went for him, right? And brought him back in. But this guy gets sacked because drug deaths were so bad under his watch. And Dundee is the second highest city statistically for drug deaths. So they just announced all sorts of new money. But we wouldn't get any of that money, right? And we don't care about their money anyway, because we believe, as Hudson Taylor said, God's work done in God's way will never lack God's resources or God's supply. And, you know, God's church are amazing. We've got a lot of people who support us monthly, who commit to giving us monthly, or folks who commit one-off, and churches who have supported us. We're grateful for support that's come from Blackhill Church, Pete, and folks like that. They have collections for us and different things. I still do a wee bit of preaching and teaching and going out and doing things and stuff like that. Folks have fundraisers and all that on Facebook, birthday fundraisers, give money for my birthday and whatever else. So, you know, God's got plenty of money, right? But he doesn't keep it in the bank in heaven. He keeps it in our bank accounts where it's dead easy to get to. And, you know, so we've never wanted for anything. And he's been so good to us. And, you know, we would never, you know, that would be one thing I would always ask for prayer for, is, you know, that we never lose our gospel convictions. Because, you know, we promote total abstinence like a lot of other projects, but we're very clear in what is at the root of the problem. And that can put us at odds with a lot of other things. And sometimes you can want to take the edge off to be more acceptable and to get the invite to speak somewhere or whatever. But I'm not interested in all that. But, you know, sometimes the praise of men. And you know, we want the praise of God. And so, you know, we want to make sure that we stay right where our gospel moorings are, you know.
That's been great, really helpful, really thankful to you. Thank the Lord for what he's done in your life and what he's still doing. Well encouraged. Do you want to give us some prayer points before we go, just in case folk want to pray? And then we'll also put the link for Hope for Glasgow and things like that in the kind of bio and all that stuff, in case folk want to check it out.
Aye, fantastic.
What can we be praying for you?
Aye, that'd be good. And if anybody, you know, that's plugging in and watching, needing support, the website's there, and that would tell you how to kind of access or support, my phone number and all that. So now you want to get in touch, talk, we're here to help. We're here to help the church, and we're here to help folks. That's what we were set up for. That would be the main prayer, that we stay to our gospel convictions. We stick to our biblical understanding. I have one member of staff who's been off sick for quite a wee while. I'd really value prayer for him. He's a good guy, but he's been off sick, and I pray that he would be returned to full health and return to us. Praying for the work amongst women. We would get the job spec right, and we would just get the right person for that job as well, that would enable us to do kind of a more work with women. And as things begin to open up as well, when we went into lockdown, we had 4 meetings, and we had 4 guys that were able to facilitate these meetings. But right at the start of lockdown, kind of one of my guys died. He died of a drug overdose. He was a Christian, and folks can slip back into the old addiction life, because remember, the root of addiction is sin, and we can slip back into the addiction life just the same way we can any sin. But for this guy, 45 hours after hearing that he was using drugs, he was dead. And that's one of the differences with that sin, is that it can kill you very quickly. So we've got 4 meetings, but now only got 3 guys, and we've also picked up a lot of people out with Glasgow, and so when lockdown lifts, we can't just dump these folks. So we want to keep support. They've come to rely on our support. Even a wee lassie in New Zealand who's 8 months clean, never been clean in her life before, using our meetings. She's 8 months clean. So we can't dump these folks. So we're trying to think through ways that maybe we can have an online presence after lockdown. And that may well be that we have our live meetings, but we find some way of being able to have a Zoom link in. So I'm trying to think that kind of through as well. So they would kind of be the main things, Pete. It's been a joy.
No, it's been great. Thank you so much. We will be praying for them at our church. I'm sure other folk will be praying too. But thankful for you, Terry. I better go and get my kids over, Pete and Cara, because it is 3:20. So great.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the My Hope Story podcast. To find out how you can have your own hope story, go to www.myhopestory.co.uk.